do you take down the most powerful country in the world? Weapons of mass destruction, maybe a cyber attack, maybe insurgency. What about Russian memes? But memes are just those pictures of cats that your friends send you, right? No one really takes them seriously. Well, now more than ever, technology like social media algorithms makes it incredibly easy for individuals to isolate themselves in their own chosen ideological circles. But these algorithms do more than give us the power to seal ourselves off from different points of view. They're the cause behind something bigger, something more sinister, something that affects liberals and conservatives alike, and something that can certainly affect you. But if you can recognize it, you can cut through its influence. This is about the weaponization of comedy. Comedic tactics are becoming increasingly more powerful tools for spreading misinformation and creating partisan divide. Tactics like sarcasm, exaggeration, and satire are being used to form and sustain political echo chambers. And as if propaganda isn't incendiary enough, it's now being packaged through humor and shot out into the internet, exactly where it's most effective. And regardless of media platform, echo chambers are hard to recognize because cognitively, it's nice to hear that our beliefs are validated. And when it comes to politics, most Americans just want the same thing, a healthy economy and a sustainable future. But where politics diverges is how we get to that. A conservative might say we need to cut taxes on the rich, while a liberal might say we simply need to eat the rich. When you're constantly fed one side of an argument, it's easy to inflate that side as being the only morally justified way. Eventually, the other side looks evil and you can't compromise. Echo chambers are easy to break out of, but they're hard to recognize when you're in one. So today, we're going to learn how these echo chambers form and the comedic tactics used to sustain them. So the first comedic tactic is just adding irrelevant details. So a comedian could say something like, Tufts University students are some of the brightest young individuals that ever got rejected from Brown University. But this can be used politically as well. Let's say that Tufts students were to protest a bill that made it easier for individuals to purchase firearms. Let's then say that a conservative news outlet reports on the protest and adds that a Tufts professor was involved in a pro-choice rally last year. The firearm protest is news. The pro-choice addendum turns it into a narrative that implies a liberal bias at Tufts and attempts to undermine the protest as a matter of ideology. Tucker Carlson uses a similar tactic. In a segment he did on millennials, he stated that millennials are irresponsible and they're bad with money, and they're also overwhelmingly liberal. By cherry-picking data and obscuring facts, Carlson can imply that the political convictions of a younger generation are somehow responsible for their supposed issues with money. To prove my point, let's use an example. So we can use these tactics and apply them to a set of facts to create a narrative or try to make someone look bad. So let's use the facts that Tufts University President Anthony Monaco lives in Gifford House and he drives a Bentley. And a pundit could say something like, Tufts University President Anthony Monaco is under criticism for living in Gifford House and driving a Bentley in the midst of a housing crisis. This has to make one wonder, why do liberals hate a man with excellent taste in automobile? Next thing to look out for is violations of the Goldwater Rule. The Goldwater Rule is a rule of medical ethics that states that a psychologist cannot speak to the mental health of a person they have not personally analyzed. And this needs to be extended to journalists as well, because with the right spin, you can manipulate the concept of psychology to prove whatever point you want. For example, John Oliver once featured on his television show a clip of Donald Trump. And in the clip, Donald Trump says that he was invited to speak on several talk shows, but he refused all the offers. At the end of the clip, Oliver contextualized the situation by saying, I'm not sure he even knows he's lying. I think he just doesn't care. The clip, viewed by itself, is ambiguous. But with an added context, it leads the audience to a certain conclusion. The example is meaningless without Oliver's hypothesis. So if John Oliver doesn't tell you that Donald Trump is a liar, chances are you won't see him as one, at least not from this example alone. The next tactic is using irrelevant details to undermine the substance of an argument. When Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez introduced the Green New Deal, Donald Trump called the proposal poorly written, and he compared it to a term paper. By making light of AOC's age and the writing of the proposal, Donald Trump is bringing in irrelevant details to undermine the ideas of the policy. Comedians do this too, but when they do it, you're supposed to find it funny. What about the mainstream media? Surely that's more regulated. Well, the problem with mainstream cable shows like Fox News or even The Daily Show with Jon Stewart is that they put entertainment first, and yet they advertise themselves as a legitimate news outlet. Fox News, which has the tagline, fair and balanced, called the investigation of Donald Trump's collusion with Russia an absurd fever dream. And even shows like The Colbert Report or The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which when they were on the air stated that they should not be taken seriously, were taken seriously. In 2008, 22% of young men reported getting their news from The Colbert Report. And in 2015, 12% of Americans reported getting some portion of their news from The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Now, the media is obviously important, but when true events are weaponized, whether intentionally or not, it begins to create a dangerous partisan divide. And as innocent as the standard TV comedian's toolkit may seem, it is brutally effective for making nuanced points while keeping political realities hidden. One of those prominent tools in this toolkit is the use of simile, with phrases like, "that's like saying." It's a proxy for understanding things, but it's also a surprisingly solid way of making a claim with no supporting evidence. As John Oliver uses it, he stated, "Payday loans are like the Lay's potato chips of finance. You can't have just one, and they're terrible for you." These comparisons make it easier to understand a situation, but it also pushes a sinister perspective onto the subject. To illustrate this point, we can go back to our Anthony Monaco example, and remember, we can use these tactics to try to make someone look bad or spin a narrative. So a pundit could say something like, "Anthony Monaco living in Gifford House and driving a Bentley in the midst of a housing crisis is like stealing all the soup from a soup kitchen so you can bathe in it like a bathtub." Simile indicates opinion and nothing more. Another subtle tactic is the use of self-deprecation. So research shows that if a person's opinion goes against their self-interest, it makes them appear more credible. So if a pundit or a news anchor makes fun of themselves, it makes it seem like they care more about facts than creating a narrative. So again, we can use this tactic and apply it to a set of facts. Someone could say something like, "Anthony Monaco says we're in the midst of a housing crisis. Now, I'm just a guy that failed his urban policy and planning minor, but are we really going to listen to the guy that lives in the biggest house on campus by himself?" Another similar tactic is the use of feigned exasperation. And exasperation isn't fact. It's not something that needs to be reported. It's a subtle tactic used by pundits to put forth an opinion when it looks like they're putting forth a question. So the next time you're watching TV and someone says, "Can you believe the Democrats are doing this?" They don't care if you believe it or not. They're trying to put forth the idea that the policy or party in question is absurd. So again, we can take this tactic and apply it to the same situation. Somebody could say something like, "What do you mean we're in a housing crisis? Have you looked outside? There's so many houses." Kind of a dumb one. Comedians operate from a position of superiority. They have the power to shed light on those in power or to abuse the partisan sentiments of American citizens. Next time you hear a political joke or see a political meme, it's important to read between the lines and try to understand what's going on underneath the punchline. This is a very unsexy way of saying just because it's funny doesn't mean it's true. It would be irresponsible to stop consuming media altogether, and it would be ridiculous to deprive yourself of the joy of comedy. But the point is, comedy is just a tool. It's a tool that should inspire questions rather than consolidate beliefs. Thank you.